Hello, teacher friends. Let's have the talk. Today, we're going to talk about the awkward topic of awkward pauses in your iTalki conversational lessons. First of all, thank you very much to Paytotal for this suggestion of discussing awkward pauses in conversations. I know it's happened to a lot of us. I want to hopefully give you some tips on how we approach awkward pauses. I also want to talk about how this has affected me personally and professionally. And I want to talk about how I have minimized awkward pauses in my iTalki conversational lessons. All right, so let's dive in. So, first of all, I want to stress that pauses are not awkward for everybody, but they could feel awkward for anybody. Yeah. And by that, I think we should recognize that there are cultural and personal and even familial factors that go into pauses. For example, a lot of students, based on the way they interacted with their parents and their grandparents and their teachers at school, pauses could either be real anxiety inducing segments, or they could actually just be normal and somewhat comforting. And I've realized this as an iTalki teacher. Silence is not awkward for everybody, but as a person, it's awkward for me. And this is actually a place where I have tried to develop and change, not just as a teacher, but as a person, to allow some of my students a little bit of space while they're speaking, and to help facilitate and to accommodate their own style of communication. While on iTalki, and just in general, I've realized that there are people who talk over each other. And that's just a cultural thing. When you realize that somebody is getting to the end of what they're saying, you jump in there and you cut them right off, and that's completely acceptable. There are people like me who wait until the second would just strategically time it so you get in there so there's no awkward pause. You keep the ball rolling in the conversation. Once the person finishes their comment or question, boom, you're right there. And then there are people who like a pause. They listen to what you say, they soak it in, they take a moment, they take a breath, and then they answer. And I've seen this with my teachers on iTalki as well. So one of my big goals right now as a teacher, and I think this will be ongoing, is to be able to identify what kind of student I have and what kind of teacher I have in terms of communication methods, and to keep an open mind to pauses and not to only think of them as awkward. With that being said, some pauses are awkward and there's no way around it. They just are. So here are some ways that we could minimize this. All right. First of all, diverse questions. A broad array of different questions. Yes, no questions. Yeah. What, where, who, why, when questions. Yeah. Conditional questions. Because I have actually began teaching a teenager recently who really doesn't give me a lot. And I think this video is perfect timing for me to kind of report on what I'm going through as a teacher for that reason. And I realized that I had been asking him a lot of yes-no questions. And you know, when you give a student yes-no questions, they have two options, and they literally have the option of just answering in one word. And yeah, you can kind of twist our arm to say, okay, give me more. Why? Right? Like follow-up questions, of course. But one thing to do is to really have diverse questions, keep them on their toes. And once they start to feel comfortable, try to build. Yeah. Using conditionals is also fantastic with this so that you're able to have your students expand their minds and go outside the box, right? So for example, if you ask them, what kind of music do you like? Fantastic. If you met your favorite singer, what would you ask them? What questions would you ask them? You know, give them something to think about, and then you'll get more content out of it. Cool. Number two, I've spoken about pictures before, so let's just get this out of the way. Describe a picture. Okay. This is more of an activity. I know it might not solve the issue with awkward pauses directly, but it could at least get your students speaking for an extended amount of time right from the get-go, right? And that should be the goal. I think for me, when I am teaching a student who is quieter, like the student I have been teaching, one thing I do is to have an activity at the very beginning of class, or maybe a couple minutes into class, where he's speaking for at least 60 seconds, no interruptions. At least 60 seconds, and he's speaking during that time. So if you just give him a picture to describe it, that is kind of like the last ditch effort. It's the last resort, but it is still an option that you could take just to get them speaking. And if they're speaking, there hopefully won't be any awkward pauses or a lack of ideas during the class. Yeah. Number three, you could get your students to prepare something. This is another thing. A lot of time when you have awkward pauses and just kind of choppy conversation in general, it could be because your students don't have a lot to say about the topic. They don't know what they're talking about. They're not familiar with the conversation topic. So getting them to prepare something before class, like a little presentation, to tell a story about when they went on holiday to this place, make it personal, then this could be a great thing. And maybe you could even get them to make a presentation, because some students feel more confident when they have something that they're presenting to you. It's like an aid, it's an auxiliary, it's support for them. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, so number four, they could be unfamiliar with topic, exactly. Number five, don't try to fill every gap. Yeah, and I think this is something that I'm learning right now. If I try to fill every gap, then my student knows that even if they don't talk, I'll be right in there, you know? I'll be right in there to fill the gap. And even though this could be good at certain points, especially in the beginning, I think it's good to allow for some silence, especially because that could be their communication method, as we were speaking about before. But on top of that, if you don't fill the gap, and that does make them feel awkward, they might try to fill the gap, right? And it takes two to tango. So I think this is worth trying and seeing how it goes. It might not be, like the best method, but it could be something to try. Allow a few silences and see what happens. I know it's scary. I know it's difficult for people like me, but it could really help your student to take these opportunities. Cool. Number six, you could get them to report on a video. So again, these are kind of just getting your student to talk, to be comfortable with speaking in general. Perfect. Number seven, a list. Give me a list. And I should have put this at the beginning of the list, because this is exactly what I've been doing with this student who has not been speaking a lot, and it has worked magic. I've seen like a U-turn in one class. I started to play hardball, and instead of just asking a question and expecting him to come up with, a detailed answer, I decided to make things very simple and plain to him, and I gave him more so like tasks. Instead of asking, what is your favorite sport, I would say, what is your favorite sport? And he would tell me, and then I'd say, what are 3 reasons why you like that sport? Yeah. Tell me 3 things that you did this weekend. Tell me 4 things that you're going to do next weekend. Yeah. And this is a way to where your students really get to expand their mind, and they get to speak for an extended amount of time. And as I said, I saw a direct change, a direct improvement with this student. Magical. Number 8, ask specific questions as well. Yeah, because sometimes if you ask a question that's too broad, they will give you answers that are too vague, right? So if you ask a question that is like more specific, so instead of asking them, maybe we could say, who is your favorite musician? You could say, who is the best, who released the best song last year or something like that. What was the best love song that you have ever heard or something? Like, go more specific, so they have to really like dive in to think about what they're saying. So that way they're not just giving you surface level answers, because a lot of surface level questions deserve surface level answers. Awesome. Another one, number 9, you could get them to explain a process. Yeah, explain the process to you, so you could, it could be maybe, how do you open an Instagram account? Or maybe something about their country. How do you get a driver's license in your country? This is another thing I did with this student, and he spoke longer than I had ever, like probably 2 minutes, which was just amazing. And again, with this happening, I'm sure over the next few classes, he's going to really feel more confidence with not only speaking longer, I mean, that's half the battle, but also feeling confident to voluntarily give his opinion without being asked. Yeah. Awesome. So part of what I'm trying to do here is to give my students the feeling that their answers are valued, that their opinions are valued, and that I'm actually interested in what they have to say. Perfect. Good stuff. Number 10, give control of the conversation to your student as well. Yeah, so that could be done by giving them options for the conversation topic. Yeah. Another thing, have them prepare questions before class for the conversation. Yeah. And another one is, when they show you a little sliver, a little hint of what they're interested in, really pursue that. Don't just kind of like brush over it. If if you're talking about technology and they spoke about a time like, that they like photography or something like that, ask them more about that. Because I think a good place to start with conversational lessons is where the student is comfortable and where they thrive. The final one is to model. Yeah, so this again is one of the last ditch efforts. Well, not completely, but if I have a student who is not participating that much and they have very short answers, I will start asking questions but giving my answer first. So you're basically giving them an example of what the answer should be. So you could say something like, so what's the weather like in your country? Because in Canada, it is super cold in the wintertime, but it's pretty hot in the summer. And honestly, I love that. I love the variety. Yeah. So what is the weather like in your country? Yeah. This could be, if it's a little bit too like aggressive, or if the answer's too long, it could be a little bit intimidating. So try to keep it short, try to keep it enthusiastic, exciting, right? But this could be another way so that they have time to think, but they're also getting the support from your model answer. It's a double whammy. All right, great. So those are a few things to keep in mind while you're conducting your conversational lessons, and to limit awkward silences. I'm sure that these are not like foolproof tips, so feel free to throw your own tips in and tell me a little bit about your stories if you have any with awkward silences. I know I've had many. All right, and until next time, keep smiling.